I want to share a story with you that shows how powerful our questions can be. I'd been leading a 4-day team event and I was travelling home on a Friday evening. I was exhausted. I jumped in a taxi at the station and I just wanted a few moments of peace and quiet. But the taxi driver, a happy, chirpy chap, wanted to have a conversation and he started talking to me. "What are you doing this weekend?" he asked. I told him not much. Being polite, I asked him, "What are you up to?" He told me he was decorating. Now, I used to be a decorator in a past existence, and that little part of my brain asked him, "Oh, that's interesting. What room are you decorating?" He told me he was doing his bathroom. Ooh, bathroom. I've had a few nightmares with a few bathrooms in my time. What are some of the problems that you're having? "Oh, yes," he said, "we've had a few problems, now you come to ask. When we started to move the bath and we're having to move the pipework, there's been one problem after another." "Well," I said, "plumbing. Oh, never touch the plumbing. That must have caused some real issues. What are some of the difficulties that your family are experiencing if you're messing around with the plumbing?" "Oh, don't ask," he said. "The bath's been in our bedroom for 2 weeks. The hot water's not running properly. Do you know what? I wish I'd never started this job." Suddenly I saw the conversation that I was having and I saw what I'd done to this happy, chirpy guy. I took a moment and thought to myself, and I asked him a different question. "You've put all this work in over the last 6 weekends. What's one part of the job that's just looking really good, that you're really proud now that it's done?" He said, "Oh, that's an interesting question. But you know, when you walk up the stairs, if the door's open and then you see the new chrome pipe, it looks absolutely fantastic. That's just how I pictured it." I know you've had a number of obstacles on the way. What have you done that's helped you overcome the challenges when they've cropped up? "Oh yeah, I found out my cousin is a plumber and he's been a brilliant help to me. Whenever I've picked up the phone, he's been straight round and we've made great progress. And actually it's quite fun to have somebody else to work with." I know that it's going to have been disruptive to your family, but I assume that you work really long hours as a taxi driver. How does your wife feel about the fact that every weekend you've been so dedicated to just commit to this project to try and get it done? Do you know what? She really respects that I'm trying to do something for our family. She really sees that I'm trying to build something that's going to help us and last for the rest of our lives in the house. Do you know what he said? "I'm going to give my cousin a call this evening. I reckon if he comes round tomorrow, we can get this job cracked by Monday." My taxi arrived and I jumped out. My question for you is, how will you use questions in the future? I was asked to mediate between 2 senior executives in an organisation with a responsibility for young people. They'd been in a long-standing dispute and their differences were escalating to the point that their work was becoming unmanageable. I spoke to each of them before agreeing to meet up, and in my conversations I was struck by how strongly they were holding on to the dispute. But there was one thing that gave me a shred of hope, and that was both of them were consistently really passionate about the young people that they represented. So I agreed to meet. As you can imagine, I'd carefully planned out how I was going to go into the conversation. My plan went out of the window in about 3 seconds flat as they launched at each other with this bitter continuation of this fight that they had maintained for so many months. I tried various ways to get into the conversation, but got to the position where I felt like a bystander. I started to wonder if I could sneak out and just let them get on with it. Then, after some quite significant time, there was a lull in the conversation. And I was suddenly reminded of that shred of hope I took from our initial conversations. I asked them this question. I was really struck when I spoke to you before today how both of you are really passionate about the young people that you represent. And both of you made the point that when you are guided by their voices and beliefs, you will make the very best decisions. On that basis, I want you to imagine that a group of those young people that you care for are stood around in this room and they've been listening to you for the last hour. What advice do you think they would give you right now? There was a moment of stunned silence, and then, to their enormous credit, one of them said, "They tell me I'm being an idiot and they tell me to apologise." And they did. The other one said, they would advise me to stand up, shake your hand and get on with the important business. And that's exactly what happened. They shook hands and they had a reasonable, constructive conversation. They still had their differences, but they got on with addressing the issues that were at hand. People had spent months telling them that they had to sort their relationship and get on with the business at hand, and they had never listened. But the question that they'd been asked had transformed their relationship in a moment. My question for you is, what are the questions that you are known for?
Hello, I want to tell you a story about how powerful questions can be. We had an opportunity to work with an executive up in the north of England. He was an incredible guy. His brain capacity for IT projects was something phenomenal, and his ability to capture what the organisation needed, turn it into a spreadsheet that got done, and deliver the work was second to none. The big challenge he had was engaging with people. He was really shy, and he was the sort of person who didn't know what to say when he was out there and just chatting. So his coach told him, put some time in your diary and schedule, go and walk the floor. So he girded himself up on the day and he went out and he thought, what am I going to ask people? And suddenly he remembered that there was a project going on. So he asked some people about the project. How's the project going? What's happening? Just trying to get through that walking the floor so he could get back to his Excel spreadsheet. A month later, 32 people had dedicated a month's worth of time to give him a report, to update him on the status of the project he really wanted to know about. And he had completely forgotten he'd even asked about it. So the question I have for you is, what are the sorts of questions you're known for? Hello. I'd like to tell you a quick story that shows the power of questions. We had the privilege of working with a group of people across 19 countries in Africa to guide a leadership program across all of those countries. And part of our work was to work with a team of very professional facilitators. And we were all sitting in Lagos one day with the hustle and bustle of that city. And one of the things that we had done is paired those facilitators up with a buddy. So they had someone to work with. And as I was walking around the area, seeing people deep in conversation, I came across the buddy pair from Zimbabwe and the Sudan. And these two were having an intense conversation, and they called me over and said, Charlie, we're really grappling with something. And so I listened to their story. The guy from Zimbabwe had found out that someone very close to him had sold him out to the security police. And only because a cousin was in the police did he manage to go into hiding in time. The problem was he'd never told his family, he'd never told his wife, because the person that sold him out was a close family friend, and the children and the wives had been friends for years. And this was tearing him apart, because he's always had an open relationship with his wife. And as we grappled with congruence and honesty and what it means to be a great leader, his question kept coming back to, what should I be doing in this context? And so they turned to me for my advice. And you know what it's like? You just think, oh, I need to give advice, but if I give advice in this context and my advice is wrong, this man could be killed. And that probably was my saving grace. So I resisted the urge to get into endless advice. And what I did was I started asking him some questions. And through the conversation, I discovered that one of his closest relationships was with his 9-year-old son. The passion for that relationship. And I just said to him, Gordon, if this was your son in this situation, what is the advice that you would give him? The question I have for you is, how will you think about questions in the future?